Well, hi everybody. Welcome to week 3 of MPH 510. It's moving along fast. We're already at the quarter mark. I generally like to record these videos from different places, and I intended on recording this week's from my office in Milwaukee, but I'm home with a sick child. So, welcome back to my home in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. In these videos, what I like to do is largely the review part of the review preview. Um, we'll touch on what I talked about in my midweek post. And so I want to do that to allow for any new ideas or thoughts that came between the post and my recording of this, but also just knowing that people take in information differently. Some um, better through this method, others through the written word. So with that in mind, what I talked about in the midweek post really has to do with the idea of references and citations. And I really want to, impress upon you the importance of that. So science moves slowly. It's a very, it's a slow moving train. Every new bit of information that we find in the research is really a product of things that have come before it. It's, the next inch forward in what we know, in our knowledge base. And so, with that in mind, it's essential that as we are getting to that point, whether it's research or talking about application of a program in a new setting, which is part of your assignment for this week, um, it's important that we lay out our case very strongly. And the big reason for that, from kind of a conceptual standpoint, is you don't want to give people a reason to dismiss you because you are going to be presenting information, you're going to come to conclusions that not everybody is going to agree with you on. Now, sometimes they might not agree with you on the methods, and it's just a helpful, a helpful and healthy discussion. And, people have different opinions all the time, or they can simply disagree with you on the very basis of what you're talking about. You look at climate change, for example. 98% of scientists agree that climate change is real, it's man-made, but there are still people who disagree. And so it's important that whenever you are laying out your information and building your case for the topic you want to address, you want to be as thorough and as nitpicky it can seem like, where the information is coming from. So you don't give people the opportunity to poke holes in things. If you jump to a conclusion that you can't prove, that can cause people to dismiss your whole train of thought, your whole way of thinking. So it's important to do that. And I think more so now than ever. Perhaps research and academic findings were pretty much limited to academics. But now, largely with social media, that's not the case anymore. It's much more out there. And so the audience who takes in the information and the findings and the research and the programmatic approaches, the people who take that in is much wider than it's ever been. And so you are going to have a much, broader, you know, difference of opinions on what people believe, what people think is accurate, and what people are willing to listen to. So that's my way of saying you need to be very thorough with your references, with your citations. Everything that leads up to your conclusions has to be grounded in research so you have the most solid footing that you can. And then eventually, once works go off into the public domain, then it's out of your hands. So you want to do the best job you can before that happens, to make sure that you are clear. Now, in this class, the public domain is what happens on our message boards and what I'm grading for you. But just going forward in public health, the public nature of public health, obviously what you are looking to do is not going to be limited to a class. It's going to be expansive and it's going to go out. And so just having that mindset, as you go forward is an important one. Which leads us into the assignment for this week. So it's a discussion board assignment. So you have your Wednesday initial post, your Friday responses, and then your Saturday summative. And it's a really, I think they're all good assignments, but I think this one is especially important in terms of getting that frame of mind, that way of thinking. So in is particular in this course, as it's your first graduate course in public health, a lot of it is getting a way of thinking, a frame of mind in how you think about public health and how you think about translating problems into solutions. So in this case, with this assignment, with this series of discussions, you're looking at evidence-based practices. Okay, so the key thing about this is the evidence. It's not just something that somebody tried. It has evidence, it's been used, it's been researched, it's been evaluated, and it's shown that it has an impact, generally a positive impact, towards addressing the issue that is being tackled. An important part of this, though, and something that you will be looking at as you digest and dissect your chosen evidence-based practice, is it's not a catch-all. Most evidence-based practices do have limitations. They have limitations a lot of times in terms of the population. Right? So if you are looking to address aerobic fitness, it doesn't necessarily mean that this one evidence-based practice is going to work for everybody, because there are different subgroups in the population who have different factors that feed into their propensity to be fit or to not be fit. And so as you go through this exercise, it's important that as you are reading these evidence-based practices and selecting the one that you want to follow through with, that you take into that account. So on Wednesday, you're going to have to you're going to have to identify the practice, look at the population in which the article that you came across focused on, what is the problem, and what is the site of implementation. That's another thing. In my case, I do a lot of work in schools. So does this work in K-12 education environment? How does it translate outside of the K-12 education environment? There's a lot of translation that goes from public health to schools and back to public health, and it doesn't always work so well. So some things, the site of implementation is a crystal clear level of importance in terms of what's being done and where is the evidence saying this works in. So there's a lot of attempts to bring methods of reducing alcohol and drug use into the schools. A lot of them started outside of schools in medical clinic settings. And so the implementation might work at your doctor's office, not so much at the school. So keeping that in mind is an important thing. And then finally, you're going to have to look for an article that talks about, that has evaluated this, that has researched this. So you can get a handle on, how does this evaluation work? How do people document these sorts of things? Then on Sunday, Saturday, for your summative post, you are going to look at everybody else's posts. So, the three people who are not you, look at what they posted, and you're going to look at the evidence. What's the most well-researched, what's the newest, and then you are going to look at adapting, applying to somewhere else, or scaling up. This is where, again, dissecting the information, dissecting evidence-based practice is so key. Who's it work for? Who's the population of interest? And what was the setting? Those are things that have to be taken into consideration when you want to look at expanding things. So Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, we're all the same in that we're largely rural with a few metropolitan areas. And what often happens is a lot of the lion's share of research happens in these urban areas. So, Milwaukee, Chicago, Des Moines, the Twin Cities, that's where a lot of the research goes, because that's where the people are, that's where the larger universities are, and all sorts of that. So then when you think about application, how does something that happens in, Minneapolis, St. Paul work in Winona? Very different populations. And so it's important that you take into consideration if you were thinking about scaling up or adapting things to a different setting. So this week, it's really about taking that evidence and peeling back the layers and getting as intimately familiar as you can with all the different nuances that people often overlook. We have research out there that goes in the public domain. People just kind of look at the headline and move on. You are not just going to look at the headline and move on. You are going to look very in depth. And having that frame of mind and that mindset of how you take in information is going to set you apart and really help you going forward as you are the ones developing programmatic approaches. And if you want to go forward to research, doing the research. So take advantage of this week of these, this assignment, really dive into it. And as always, if you have any questions, please get a hold of me. I'm always available. And that, have a great week, everybody.